It's been one policy that has been talked about so much, right from the period of the 2024 campaigning till the election of John Dramani Mahama and his swearing in. One of the first appointments he did was to appoint a presidential advisor, 24-hour economy. Following its launch, it'll be important for us to understand it. But hey, many of you have seen the document. You've gone through it. You've heard the president talk about it. You've heard the presidential advisor on it also speak about it. So this morning we want to do something very simple. We want to ask, what is in it for you? How do you monitor it? What are the timelines? What are the incentives? And we're privileged to be joined by Goosie Tanoh, Augustus Tanoh, you call him Goosie Tanoh, who is the presidential advisor, the 24-hour economy. Good morning, sir, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I believe you're doing very well, and congratulations on the launch.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. So let's get into it.
Sure.
You've talked about everything that you want to do. You've talked about how...
Everything we are going to do.
we are going to do.
Yes.
And you've talked about how government's contribution will be catalytic.
Yes.
But for the private sector, let's start up from this point of view. What are the incentives for them? So when we talk about, say, Grow 24, and let me indicate my bias, I am a farmer. So let's start with what I am interested in so much. Grow 24.
Okay, so let me explain how the Grow 24 will work out. There are already farmers like you existing, all right? And you know that there are some certain barriers that you confront. Fertilizer availability, mechanization support, on-farm maintenance through expanded and intensified extension and so on, and many other components. When we wrote the document, and the document was written, as I said yesterday, by several interactions with the farmers, with industrialists, private sector, with the state and so on, they said, look, if we have certainty of land title, if we have water for irrigation, so we can be operational 365 days a year and do several crops, particularly the vegetables complex and the cereals complex. If we have connectivity, data, so that we can basically transport information, access information simply and clearly. You know, right now you can even do extension online. Okay. If we can have road systems that allow us to exit our produce to market centers, if we can have logistical support that allows us basically to achieve greater efficiency in logistics and a reduction in transport costs to market centers or to factory gates, then we know that agriculture will be de-risked and we can invest. And if we have the right type of funding. So basically the program is structured around one, production transformation, supply chain and markets efficiency, and of course human capital development, because you want the workers that you basically are going to work with to be technically competent, committed to their work, and disciplined, because without discipline and a work ethic, you cannot challenge the Asians who basically have a tremendous work ethic and therefore are competitive globally. Now, when I want to be a farmer, what do I want to, especially an industrial farmer, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a lower tax burden. I'm looking for incentives that allow me to invest in specific value chains. I'm looking for better and lower priced credit or loan support. At some point, I may even be looking for equity injection to grow my business. And I'm looking for long-term funding. And I'm looking for capable, skilled workers. Apart from all the infrastructure components that I've mentioned about energy and so on. So what we've done is to design the project in two parts.
Okay.
The infrastructure that I mentioned, land, energy, water, and so on, we basically said, look, the best point of contact, even though the project will be done all over the country, the main central corridor of expansion and transformation is the Volta Lake Corridor, or the Volta Economic Corridor. Because on both sides, you have 10 kilometers this way, 10 kilometers this way, 8 million hectares of land. multiply that by 2.4 or 2.42. That is almost 20 million acres of land.
Yeah.
All right? If you net out the forest reserves, you have 4 million hectares of land. If we're able, together with the farmers who are already there, build out and develop agroecological parks that we call Ablodo, integrate the small farmers to an anchor farmer like you, who has the capacity and the experience to be able to cultivate 10,000 hectares, let us say. And on that 10,000 hectares, what are we going to find? So you are private sector. You are basically plowing and planting and threshing and so on this land. You're growing soybean, maybe a part is rice, maybe a part is vegetable, and so on and so on. Crop approach. You have an investor who wants to provide farmer mechanization support. So, GIF, which is the SPV holder and concession holder of all this land from VRA, alongside the communities that are alongside the lake, all right, will basically provide the energy. It will provide the irrigation backbone. Because that opportunity is there and there are farmers there and there are cooperatives integrated to the anchor farmer like yourself, an investor who wants to basically confine themselves to mechanization services and extension services will be there as a private owner of a farmer service center and provide mechanization services for your 10,000 hectares, for your, for the small farmers who are integrated to you. Also provide extension services and support, including technology support and so on, in terms of seeds and so on. So that is itself, agriculture inputs becomes a business run privately, and people are doing it, but they're doing it in a fragmented manner. We want to concentrate that. So you, the farmer, don't have to invest in machinery. So your capex component is much lower. You basically rent based on protocols established by the Ablodo. So it's fair to you and it's fair to the co-op farmer who is basically selling. And what is your role? Your role is that apart from cropping your own farm, you also become a conduit for input credit to the farmers, smallholders who are integrated to you. And why are small farmers important? They produce 90% of our food. There are people who want to wish them away. You can't. So the idea is really to upgrade them in terms of their facility with technology. So it is through the anchor farmer that we begin then to integrate them, formalize them through the co-op systems, provide them with upgraded technology, upskill their capacities, and also put them together in a way that is easier to finance them. Because when they group, it's easier to finance.
So the
risk profile is different.
So this agreed 8 models under the 24-hour economy.
It's an organizational form to deliver the Grow Ghana.
Okay.
Which is model number 1.
So
it's also the organizational forms integrated to de-risk the funding under Go Fund 24. All right? Because what is the problem in this country? If you want to borrow money for agriculture, 95% of the time, you will not get it. Why? Because only 5% of bank credit goes to agriculture. If you want to borrow money for exports, you won't get it. Because only 7% goes to exports.
Okay.
So the idea is basically to move away from this complete paradigm where we are constrained in our productivity because you can't get funding to a situation where you do have funding because you have an SME on-lending platform that supports enterprises like yourself as a farmer. All these co-ops, they're private sector, so you support them. You support them with the capex that basically allows you to basically de-risk what they're going to do because they have energy, they have water year-round, so nobody's going to say, oh, I borrowed your money and I'm so sorry the rain didn't come. No. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right.
I want us to take it from the top. If you can tell us about briefs about each of the 8 models and what you seek to do with the models.
Okay. So Grow Ghana, we looked at the import bill. We import about 2.6 billion directly of food and indirectly ancillary service relating to that. So it nets out to be about $3 billion. This $3 billion is partly responsible for the instability in our exchange rate, because we demand dollars to be able to import food, and therefore always demanding more dollars means that your city basically is going to go down. So that's number one. We looked at the impacts of those food items on inflation. If we're able to produce those things competitively, how will that impact inflation? In two ways. One, because you are demanding less foreign exchange. If you produce it here, you are able to contribute to the stabilization of the exchange rate at competitive levels. All right. Two, if you are able to produce food efficiently and competitively by resolving not only the yield problems, the on-farm maintenance problems, and better mechanisms for growing, including mechanization support, then you're basically also bringing down the cost of food. And if you're able to deal with the supply chain problems, then you're able to bring down your cost of food by almost 45%. Let me explain that.
Okay.
If you look at the end product of most of our food at your table, or to the factory as raw material, or for export, the logistical component of what you're eating on your table, originating from Ghana anywhere, is about 60% of the cost buildup. Even more than the material that you're basically transporting. 60%. The global average for logistical component of transport is 15%. So we are 45% more inefficient than the global average. If we're able to do that, what does it mean? If we improve supply chains, we basically bring down the cost of food, even if it's to the global average, by another, 45%. How does this work? The reason why we chose the Volta is because water transport, historically, has been the basis for the development of industry and agricultural development and transformation. Mississippi River, the Thames River, the Danube River, the Nile River, even the Congo with all its problems. Because naturally they need water, they need power. You remember the old windmills that used to crack green?
Yeah.
All around the, with the stone, mechanisms. All right. So this is deliberate. If you move goods north and south, east and west on the Volta, which has a shoreline of 3,283 miles, it is 1/8 the cost of road transport. Why is that? I can move 700 tons on one barge with a tugboat up and down. To do 700 tons of the same produce from Accra to Tamale, how many trucks do I need?
You need a lot of trucks.
10, about 15 trucks. All spewing fossil fuels into the atmosphere, destroying your carbon footprint basically as a country. So in doing that, you're reducing the cost of transport, you're reducing the cost of logistics, you're accessing arable land that's very fertile, you're providing an organizational framework that allows anchor farmers, commercial farmers to grow, but not excluding smallholders, but integrating smallholders by formalizing them through the co-op system. You're providing a business opportunity for those who basically want to do mechanization support, own tractors, earn money from tractors by plowing for you 1 acre, maybe 400 agric-acre, maybe 400 CDs. They calibrate, as you calibrate your costs, that they can make this margin. Threshers. One of the biggest, when there's a soybean harvest, do you know one of the biggest problems the farmers face? No threshers. And those soybeans, they split.
Yeah.
So if you don't harvest in time,
you will lose your grain.
You lose your grain because it will split and drop.
In fact, the first level of the challenge is the harvesters.
Correct.
Because we don't have harvesters that are low enough to be able to harvest properly.
So you have to design. So in fact, one of the components of our program to support the Grow Ghana is machinery and technology.
Okay.
I mean, ask yourself really, between you and me, why should we be importing aboboya from anywhere else? This is basic technology. Why do we have to import disc plows from anywhere? This is basic technology.
So under that component, the 24-hour economy will support an institution like, say, Gratis Foundation.
Privatize Gratis.
Okay.
Inject Gratis. Make it a JV.
So we want to privatize Gratis.
Well, what we're doing in the fabrication component, we're going to basically create a fabrication industry out of what already exists.
Okay.
I mean, so for instance, when you see a car that is broken down and smashed completely from Temaport, what happens to that car 3 weeks later?
Yeah, they fix it.
It's new.
Yeah.
So you have the soft technology here. So you want to basically structure that in a way that also allows you to produce your agricultural implements, threshers, combined harvesters, the equipment for combined harvesting that deals with your soybean problem, because our soybean doesn't go as tall as what they do in the Midwest, in Iowa and so on. All right, it's short. So you need to design implements that can basically harvest.
There are people who are also saying that, look, what's the research and development component in this whole 24-hour economy?
Big time.
I know we are going ahead of ourselves because you mentioned
nobody's important because you can't.
Favor is low, right? That's our variety. Do we have plans to resource CSIR, all these institutions, and even private sector research institutions to develop better varieties for?
CSIR is already developing better varieties of seed. I think what we need to do with CSIR is basically try and get them investment to multiply, domesticate these seeds, multiply them. They don't have investment. One of the problems is that when an investor, well, let me give an example. An investor goes, he says, look, I like these seeds that you're doing for grain. You're getting me 6-7 tons per hectare for rice, let's say, per hectare. Other people are getting 4. And it's a fact. Okay. So let me invest in you. They invest in CSI. CSI gives it to everybody. I'm an investor. I want exclusivity for the grain that I've supported you to develop. So we need to sit down with government, the Ministry of Environment, CSI itself, and the private sector, and see how we can basically sort out this intellectual property angle of the research profile that allows it to dovetail and integrate in the industry.
The last time I engaged, Winston and I, we engaged some researchers from CSR. They told us that it costs about $30,000 to $45,000 to develop one variety of a crop. And so with your $4 billion, this shouldn't be difficult to do too.
Not at all.
Maybe
and we can do that. In fact, one of the things we've been trying to do for our secretariat is to headhunt somebody who knows how to raise money for research.
Okay.
We have a program. It's the silver. It's like a mentee program, right? There are people, Ghanaians, who are abroad. They've run companies, they run fabrication systems, they run research organizations, they raise money. We're looking for people who are in this research space, who can work with CSI and raise money through private sector and through what do you call technology licensing.
Yeah.
A lot of these extraordinary varieties that are being moved by Syngenta and so on that we're all buying crazily when basically we could develop our own, is that a lot of those seeds or processes, technology processes, whether genetics, engineering and so on, is actually developed in universities. And the big companies basically finance the universities to do the research. And when they're going to write the patent, the universities are part of the patent application. The specific researcher who made the breakthrough is part of the patent application and holder, and the multinational whatever. All right. At some point, when it's rolled out commercially, more often than not, the multinational buys out the other two, and the university makes money, and then continues to invest that in additional research, and that's where we have to get to. So there's research integrated into what we're doing.
All these things sound very good, but
they are good because they're practical.
The average Ghanaian wants to know. So under Grow 24, you have the Abledo, you have the mechanization, you have research, you have the logistical links and everything. At the end of, say, 3 years, how many Abledo should you expect to be operational?
Okay, so
how many badges, for example, do you envision to have put on the Volta? Would the Volta have been fully charted by then, so that if Winston and I manage to raise money and want to put our badge on?
So let's go step by step. What does an Abledo? Abledo is a farm town. That's the meaning ever. It has mechanization support. It has irrigation. It has 24-hour energy. It has interrelated road systems within the catchment of the Abledu. All right, and it has extension support on all the components that you require. It has farmers organization, anchor farmer. The anchor farmer is a guaranteed market for the small farmer. The anchor farmer also has a guaranteed market because co-located to Abledu are industrial parks that process your products as raw material, or those that go as offtake, either to buffer stock or to the wholesale market in Techiman or Kumasi or Accra as for the wholesale and retail market. So that's what an Abledu is, right? Now, we have planned, there are more than 100 Abledus. Our aim is to begin with 20.
Okay.
Big ones and small ones.
Okay.
Producing the crops in the value chains were identified as very key based on criteria I told you: inflation, import dependence, price competitiveness, maize, right? Maize for feed, maize for human beings, right? Soybean for feed, soybean for
oil.
feed, for oil,
And for human beings.
for cosmetics, lecithin, emulsifiers, glycerin, because you can get glycerin not just from animals but from petroleum, but you can also get it from what do you call it, oil seeds, because they are also basically what do you call it, have polymerization and so on. And then you have rice. We import 1.8 million. We have a demand for 1.8 million tons of rice. We import 1 million tons because we can only produce 800,000 tons. So incrementally, through your Abledus, integrated with small-scale farmers, upskilled and upgraded because their on-farm practices have changed, their ability to retain water in the soil and the husbanding of the soil has improved, and so on. You get the yields that you're looking for. Instead of 4 tons per hectare, you get 7 tons per hectare, and basically you have an offtake also. You have a rice mill nearby. There's a rice mill in Tamale now. It's operating at 10% capacity.
The Tamana.
Avinash.
Yes, there's Avinash. There's also Tamana.
10% capacity, because they don't have enough raw material.
Okay.
Why do they not have enough raw material? Because you have Thai rice all over the place. And that's really what we have to do. So when you do that, basically you're creating employment, you're creating a supply of raw materials to industry, you're creating food self-sufficiency, not only for us as human beings, but also for the poultry industry, which is a cross-value chain.
Now, talking about starting with 20, and again, when we started, we talked about this, because I want to come back and find out where are we. So the 20 that we're beginning with, for instance, when are we looking at setting up all the 20, making them functional?
Okay, so this is how we're doing. Okay. Between now and January, we're doing the concept notes for the Abledus that are going to start, and the Wumbe. Wumbe are the industrial parks. It means progress, all right? Okay, we're doing the concept note, because you have to do the concept note so that you can basically test with the bankers and financiers whether it's financeable. So between now and January, we're doing that. Once we clear the path that is bankable, then we begin to then put together the funding arrangement based on the funding ecosystem that we've established. The funding ecosystem is very simple. GIF is the infrastructure provider. To make it happen, for you to go and invest in Abledu and be an anchor farmer, you want to be sure that the infrastructure is there.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right? So GIF is the infrastructure provider. And basically, we're seeking from government what we call a viability gap funding, so that GIF can then, through the 3 SPVs to create, one for the water transport system and logistics, one for the Abledus, and one for the industrial parks, right? Can basically have that viability gap so that it creates the conditions for the private sector to say, okay, that funding gap that otherwise, if it was not there, will make this unprofitable and commercial. It's there because government has plugged it, so I will invest in Abledu. I invest in the SPV to develop the infrastructure. You know, there are some companies whose business model is simply to develop infrastructure and make long-term, especially pension funds, make long-term returns, because they have to make sure that they have sufficient liquidity to pay out every year for many, many years going forward. These are, especially these annuity funds.
Okay. So realistically, I mean, once you're done with
so when you do that,
then
you begin to go into the market to raise the capital for the different aspects of the program I mentioned, that they do the capex and so on, and the SME enterprise financing. So
So-
SME financing, we have DBG as the anchor. So through DFI loans, concessional loans, right, we're going to raise about 1 billion to 1.5 billion. We have some initial commitments on that already. Okay. So DBG then becomes the borrower and on-lends to the banks.
Okay.
And the banks through strict protocols. We don't want a situation where we lend, DBG lends, and then the usual thing happens, the bank go and do something completely different with it. They treat it as they treat every other loan, and then it doesn't reach you, the anchor farmer, because you're an agric.
Okay.
So the protocols will be very strict and enforced, because the Bank of Ghana is supervising this aspect, because they're providing hedging of whatever foreign exchange comes to DBG as part of the on-lending.
Okay.
So that hedging costs and exchange rate loss possibility is removed. So it's not priced into what is given to you.
Okay.
Some of the regulatory requirements about collateral and so on and so forth is basically not removed entirely, but there's some measure of forbearance, so that you have a situation where the actual liability and asset on the books is not really treated as normally we treated under the prudential requirements.
Okay.
So it's more or less treated as off balance sheet.
So when we return after this break, what we're going to do, and this morning we're joined by Mr. Goosie Tanoh, who is presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy. When we return after this break, what are we going to do? Talking about the Agbleduo, you've talked about in the preparation of the concept and everything, and the funding and everything. We'll look at a bit of the timelines. You talk about from now to end of to January, for instance. We'll go beyond that and get into.
And our guests this morning, we have the presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy and accelerated export development. Usually that is not added, but it's part of the role. 24-hour economy and accelerated export development. And we also have Abdul Nasser Alidu. He's also with the 24-hour economy secretariat. And we are talking about the 24-hour economy, what you must know. So far, we've mentioned Grow 24. We've discussed it extensively.
But you see, Growth 24 dovetails into Make 24.
Yes.
So when I mentioned, for instance, that soybean, for instance, then that means that you are basically growing the primary product, getting it processed, because you have co-location with industrial parks, or even within the same Abledu, you have a processing facility. So that will give you, they'll make edible oil, correct? Feed, so it goes into the feed industry, and also other products for other products like cosmetics, glycerin, and so on. I mentioned that already. So it's an integrated program. So you do the primary, then you do the value addition.
Yes.
And then you do the
and then there's the connect,
export,
and then there's the
wholesale.
fund and all those
Right.
things.
And
So
the connect basically allows you to move your goods.
What I want you to do
Make.
for us, before we end this conversation, because I know we cannot exhaust a 24-hour conversation in 1 hour.
No, we need 24 hours
Is
to
to
do
give
that.
us highlights of the all the models.
Correct.
At least you've gone in detail with the Grow 24. There are 7 other models. What are they? What do you see to do with them? What are the expected outcomes we should look forward to in, say, 3 years?
Okay, so Grow feeds directly into food and beverages, all right, which is very important. It also feeds into machinery and technology, because one of the things we want to do is to begin to develop our farm implements, as I mentioned to you. Naso take over the textile and garments company.
So give us the other models. And
all right, so I'll give it to you in terms of what the what's the big picture, so that you understand how it is integrated, and then we'll talk about what we are expecting to achieve under each one of them. So mind you, in terms of the approach and the way we are looking at all of this, is we are adopting an integrated value chain approach. That's important because part of our analysis basically showed that there are a lot of good things that we do in this country. The problem though is you don't get the effect that flows into other places. So you do something, and basically what you realize is, you've impacted just one part of the economy, and the benefit that should flow through, you are not getting it. So, right, what we are then doing is, how do we integrate everything so that, when one part of the economy is growing, it affects every other part of the economy. So, Mr. Tanoh talked about the Grow 24, which is looking at agric. But if you're going into agric, you need implements, right? Today, almost every implement we use, we are importing. So part of what we've been thinking about is, how do we ensure that the agric that is we are doing is also powered by the local economy. So that's where you have Make 24, for instance, coming. So under Make 24 is really about manufacturing, ensuring that we modernize the economy and modernize the way we do things. What that means is we need to add value to the things that we produce over here, and we need to get to the stage where we are producing the things that we need and the things that we use. So under Make 24, we start off with machinery and fabrication. The idea under machinery and fabrication is to start producing the things that we need for our farms. The threshers that he talked about, the plows, the aboboyas, and all of those things. If you go to you mentioned Gratis. If you go to the Gratis website, there's a long list of about 140 things that we can make over here. Unfortunately, Gratis is almost dead, and we are not making good use of all of this technology. So it's under metals and fabrication, machinery and fabrication, we want to get to the stage where we are actually producing this. So as part of that, we are looking to set up a machinery park in Kumasi.
In Kumasi.
You know, Kumasi is where, if you go to Swami, you have all sorts of, technology that's actually over there. So let's move it forward. Rather than just use it to reassemble things that have been assembled, let's use it to actually make things. Now, if we develop this capacity to make things for our farms, to make things for our factories, because you go to a factory today and they are setting up and they tell you a big part of the cost, is the reason they are uncompetitive because they have to import every single thing into that factory. But there are some that we can make over here. If we get to the stage where we are making things for the farms and the factories, eventually we'll start making the TVs and all the consumer goods that we are using at home, right? So the idea of Make 24 then is to develop our, manufacturing capacity so that we are making the things that we need. So that's Make 24.
So I know that there are some companies that make TVs, some companies that assemble vehicles here.
Yes.
As knockdowns.
Yes.
But now you want to move from that assembling.
Yes.
Into making the components
into actually
themselves
developing
and
the
building
technology.
them here.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
so
we do have the capacity.
Okay.
So if you look at Make 24, machinery and fabrication is a big part. Then you have textiles and garments. Now, under textiles and garments, we are looking at setting up a textiles and garment park in Akosombo area, and then garments park in 7 other urban centers across the country.
Okay.
Why is this important? We've all seen what's happening on the global market, especially with US tariffs and all of that. And there's a lot of interest, especially from Asia, in producing from here, so nearshoring, producing from here and then exporting into some of those markets. We can take advantage of that. We are primed to take advantage of that.
Do you have the raw material?
Okay.
You don't need the raw material.
Okay.
Japan,
Okay.
as a classic, Japan has no raw materials. It imports, adds value through its technology and the skills of its workers, and then re-exports.
But one of the challenges the textiles industry has in the country, when we were actively producing cotton and our ginneries were working and all that, they could source raw material locally, but now they have to import.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, I see the point you're making. But so long as you have the skill set, you have the machinery and incentive regime, you can still be very competitive, right? By importing your raw material, then the rest you basically do here. Because whatever you're bringing, you're adding value.
Yeah.
All right? And you're adding value for the export market and the domestic market. The problem with Ghana is that we have allowed our borders to be totally porous. So something like GTP is killed by dumping, not only dumping, but countries basically steal their trademark, steal their industrial designs, and go and make them in some other jurisdiction, bring them here, doesn't come through the correct border, and to be dutied, pay the requisite import taxes and so on, and end up here duty free, and then kill GTP who are paying duties and so on. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So we have to. It's a whole system of compliance. It's a whole system of determined regulation, and a whole system of providing the requisite incentives that hang together.
Yes, yeah. but I still want us to stay on the textiles a bit, because
Sure.
if you look at our history, growing cotton was one of the key things we used to do, and we were good at that. That's why the ATLs, the Printexes, the GTPs, and all those companies flourished. For some reason, at a certain point, there was crisis in that space, and it died. So one would assume that we still have the capability and the knowledge and farmers who can grow these. Would that not be a good place to go with Grow 24, especially in the north where they have the track record of growing cotton and related stuff for to feed the industry?
So let me take that because we've actually done a lot of work over there. There are two schools of thought.
Yeah.
There's a school of thought that thinks that we are not competitive in growing cotton. So let's forget about it. And that, we should look at this as a regional project. So that it's not just about Ghana, but you are in Ghana, you have Burkina producing cotton, you have Benin producing a lot of cotton. You can look at it as a regional market, import from them, produce, and then you can also then supply to the whole region.
So on this call, you see the textile industry as a regional agroecology, where Ghana is a production hub that adds value to
that applies to all the value chains.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's one school of thought. There's a second school of thought that thinks that we can actually produce the cotton over here. And that's, like you're saying, Ghana Cotton in Tamale and all that, they were doing it before. What happened was because there wasn't a lot of offtake, most of the farmers stopped doing it and started using their land to farm other things. There were people who were involved in that project that have come to see us and that we are in conversation with. Now, what we need to do is to ensure that in developing all of these things, we're putting our money in the places where you get the biggest, bang, right?
So what school of thought do you belong to?
Pardon?
What school of thought do you belong to?
Is to do the right thing. The school of thought I belong to is to do the right thing.
Which is?
So what we are doing is we are holding. So in the coming weeks, we are holding a round table with the cotton industry, cotton value chain players. And the idea there, so there are people all over. There are even a few of them that were involved in the Ghana Cotton that are no more in the country, but that are willing to participate. So the idea is to have a full discussion on what do we do with the cotton value chain. We've already held a roundtable on textiles and industry, textiles and garments. And based on that, we've identified some locations where we would do the textiles and garments park. And we are moving forward with it. So this next roundtable is to look at the full value chain and see what is the best thing for Ghana to do. Should we produce the cotton or should we rely on our neighbors? And that is going. But the whole thing is, and it's also something we need to understand about the program. The program, like Mr. Tanoh said earlier on, is a living document. It's not, it's not cast in stone. Okay. And as we are going on, we will learn lessons, we will learn new things, and we would adjust according to it. The strategy is firm. But the details, as you get along, you will learn and you need to be able to adjust. So that's what we are looking.
But I want to return to, we mustn't make the mistake and think that you must have all the raw materials in Ghana before you can be competitive. Côte d'Ivoire produces cotton. Burkina produces cotton. Guinea produces cotton. Togo produces cotton. Niger produces cotton. Benin produces cotton. So you have to look at your comparative advantage in relation to what they're doing and see whether if you source their cotton with your value addition, you can be profitable. So at the end of the day, as Nas said, it is doing the right thing. And the right thing for a business is whether you are price competitive and you have the quality assurance that allows the market to say, I like this product origin from Ghana because it meets my price targets and also meets my quality targets. Okay. So let's be very clear about that. Although we're not excluding the point you're making, that maybe we could go. I
just wanted to buttress the point, his point. So the problem we've had in Ghana is that when we import to produce, we consume everything here. We don't export. Right. So we import more than 50% of inputs to produce, and we consume more than 90% over here. In this instance, in the garment industry especially, it's highly export focused.
Driven,
and so it doesn't hurt to actually import the raw materials to produce and then export. It actually, you're adding value to export. So that's actually, and that's why within the incentive scheme, if you look at the incentive schemes we propose, there's a 3% rebate on import duty that you can actually use for your export that you can use for your import duties, and that is meant to encourage people who import to produce to also export.
You know,
You should give them the
I've been
figures.
hitting on this
You
because
should give them the figures.
if you look at the data, Ghana is, I don't know if it's changed, but the last time I checked, we're the world's leading importer of used clothing.
Yes.
And so I know that this textile thing can change a lot, even when it comes to environmental sustainability, because a lot of the
Yeah.
used clothing, when I was doing my MPhil, for example, we realized that they all ended up in landfill sites, creating
Or,
another
or in the
problem.
sea.
So next year, I want to come back to the 24-hour economy and see the progress we are making in this particular area.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to the make, next year, I want to see if we are importing fewer agric implements.
Fourth quarter next year.
Fourth quarter next year. So you've given
So,
us.
so let me
growth,
finish Mick.
Mick.
So
If
Mick,
you can give us the other ones before we wrap up. Yeah.
but Mick, there are a few more. There's pharmaceuticals under Mick, right? Pharmaceutical is both a security issue and also an issue of competitive advantage. I mean, a security issue because you see, pharmaceuticals, medicine, health is one of those places where you need to ensure that you are self-sufficient, right? And that even when global supply chains are affected, you are not severely affected. And we saw that during COVID. Today, we're told that Africa produces only about 3% of the medicine that we use in Africa. That is unacceptable, right? And that's why you have, Africa CDC and others trying to build capacity locally for production. Now, if you take a look at West Africa, Ghana and I think Nigeria are the only countries in which our FDAs,
regulatory.
yes, the regulatory agencies have achieved
Level 3.
Level 3 in the with WHO, which means we can produce medicine and export to other countries under WHO procurement rules. And that's also why we are looking at producing vaccines and all of that in this country. So what do we want to do? Couple of things. One, we want to set up the Legon Pharmaceutical Innovation Park. The idea there is to do a number of things. One, today, if you talk to manufacturers of pharmaceuticals in Ghana, they tell you that the pharmacy schools in Ghana are training clinical pharmacists and not necessarily industrial pharmacists.
Okay.
So you want to get to the stage where you are training pharmacists who understand how to produce the drugs, not just, the clinical part of pharmacy. So part of what we'll do in there, and that's why we're looking to co-locate it with the University of Ghana, is to train industrial pharmacists so they can get into industry and support the industry, because you need the people. So that's number one. Number two is also to develop the APIs that are important for us. There is an LI that was passed in 2024 that essentially identified drugs that are essential and that can be produced in Ghana, and looking to support so the LI basically look to ensure that in the procurement system, those drugs are sourced from Ghana. Now, it's not enough to just source the drugs. We also need to look at how we produce the active ingredients, the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are used to produce it. If you talk to anybody in the industry, what they tell you is that the problem is producing APIs can be difficult and expensive. And so you need to bring together a number of parties who have the capability to be able to do this. So part of what we'll do within that park is to set up an SPV that is able to provide the APIs that we require for these drugs. Then three is also to promote contract manufacturing. Why do we want to promote contract manufacturing? Today, most of the producers of medicine in this country, they produce their own brands.
Yeah.
And so when you go for tendering and they compete with the guys who import, the thing though is a lot of the guys who import, they are at a stage where they would love to be able to produce in Ghana. But to produce in Ghana, means you need to go to your competitor who has the manufacturing capability to produce for you, which means they understand completely your cost component and you can no more compete with them. So what we need to now do is to get to a stage where we have pure contract manufacturers, people who understand pharmaceutical manufacturing and who you can come to with, whatever you want, they will manufacture for you and then you focus on doing the marketing. So that's also part of what we are looking to promote within the pharmaceutical part, so that we get to a stage where we've developed the capability to produce pharmaceuticals, we've developed the people, and then we are also producing the active pharmaceutical ingredients to be able to promote. So that's.
So we have Grow 24, Make 24.
You want us to move on?
Build 24,
Fund 24,
Show 24, Connect 24, Fund 20. At least
we've talked about it.
Most of them
we've talked. Connect supply chain.
Yes, Aspire 24 and Go 24.
Talking about supply chain and everything. I mean, that's a quick question that I got. Someone says, "I'm happy he's talking about logistics." What is the support for some of us who've already invested millions in that area already?
Well, I think that if you're within the value chains, we propose in the incentive regime a series of possible incentives. They relate to tax rebates. They relate to time of day production, so shift systems. They relate to exports in particular, export bonus systems, and also duty drawback systems that he just described. So there's a range of incentives, but we are not really at liberty to go into detail because we're negotiating with the Ministry of Finance. And the Ministry of Finance is also making sure that whatever we're proposing doesn't derail their revenue targets under the IMF program.
Okay.
So they have to bounce it off the IMF as well, which is a sensible position that the minister has taken.
Who want to be part of the 24-hour
the value chains, yeah.
What do they do?
You don't have to come and register, but if you're in the value chain, if you are producing rice and milling rice, and you're integrated to farmers and ablodos who are also supplying you, and you're achieving certain levels of capacity utilization, and also are able to say, because you're 100% operational, using all your capacity, and you have to run shift systems, you can get a tax rebate.
So should they write to you, or what system?
Okay, so our system is based on performance.
Okay,
it's not because you are located in Joy FM and Joy FM has designated as a free zone that you get the incentive. You get the incentive by doing what the law requires you to do to get the incentive. It's performance related. Okay. And we looked at Vietnam. We looked at India. India has a PTI system. We also looked at several other countries in our sub-region. And we said, look, if you bring in discretion, you're encouraging corruption. If you don't tell an investor clearly what they will get and what they have to do to get it, you have problems with basically people not knowing where to invest and what to invest in. And basically you also expand the
Mr. Tanoh, in 24 seconds.
Yes.
After 3 years of implementing a 24-hour economy program, how much GDP growth should we forward to?
When we're writing
24 seconds.
When we're writing the manifesto, we projected 6% per annum.
Okay.
We believe that if we are able to achieve the combination of Feed Ghana and the private sector investment in the ablodos, we can propel aggregate GDP to levels around 8%, and also improve manufacturing to substantial levels, which will allow us to probably work within the band of 6 to 8% per annum GDP, and go further, because you know how economies grow. You basically get the critical mass, and then you're going, and that's really what this program is going to do, to create the critical mass, and within 2 or 3 years you begin to see. And one of the great things that is happening, and I'd like to conclude, if you allow me.
Sure, please go ahead.
You see, without macro stability, all that we're talking about is plenty of talk. So what the framework that Mr. Forson and the Bank of Ghana are doing with the President's support is to provide a stable macro environment. Low inflation. We started inflation at 24%. We went to 18. Yesterday, I'm told we're at 13.4, 13.7%.
13.7, yeah.
13.7. The minister projected 11% by the end of the year. It looks like we're heading towards that way. Why do I say that? Because we're in June. The main harvest begins in August. So definitely the harvest also will bring down prices. The exchange rate, the president has said, we're going to defend the exchange rate within the band of 10 to 12. So if we're able to protect the exchange rate within that band, and then just generate the records of growth that we're seeing in agriculture, which grew at 6.7% last quarter, services grew by 9.6%, and so on and so forth, then we can begin to see the kind of resilience in the macro environment that stabilizes, that makes you as an investor say, well, if I come into this economy, I know that inflation is coming down, so my costs are going to go down. I know that the real sector in terms of supply chain and so on is basically being improved. I know that I have the requisite seeds, the requisite environment that doesn't allow me to be going chasing landowners. Every 5 minutes, a new landowner comes in, I own this land. You have all of that sorted. Then what happens is that you as an investor, you come, and as Nas described it, you plug and play. You come, you set up your farm, you clear the land, you have the farmer service center owned by a private sector to provide you with the land preparation requirements. You have your seed extension group there who are providing you with support. So you basically just come in with your money, your technology, your expertise, and your workforce that is competitively trained to do what you have to do. Same with industrial parks. And it's happening globally. It's nothing new. But you just have to learn the right things and achieve the best practice and create an incentive environment and a macro environment that supports what we're trying to do. So basically, all the 24 Hours is doing is to support the macro by achieving growth.
Okay. Well, Mr. Goosie Tanoh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you also, Abdul Nasser Ali.
Can we add a website?
Please go ahead.
Because I think it will be good to visit the website to learn a bit more. It's 24hplus.gov.gh.
Okay.
So if you want to learn more and even express your interest in joining any of the projects, go to 24hplus.gov.gh.
And let's not make the mistake that the 24 is for just the Secretariat or NDC. It's a citizens program. It's a program for all Ghanaians, totally mobilized to ensure that we achieve the productive capacity and productivity that we are very capable of. Okay. So we become leaders not only in agriculture, food production and so on, but industrial production in the sub-region and within after. The world is changing. America is becoming isolated. Europe is also creating its own barriers. We have to look to our own. Great. 425 million people in ECOWAS, 1.4 billion people in AFTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Goosie Tanoh, who's Presidential Advisor at the 24-Hour Economy. And thank you also, Abdul Nasser Ali, who's Head of Strategy and Program, the 24-Hour Economy Secretariat. And in all of this, you're talking about issues concerning strategy and how you deal with that. The good news is that Dr. Jeff Bassi of the Institute of Leadership and Strategy is here, and he's up next on the Super